Hello everybody, my name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today we'll be doing a deep dive on God's Not Dead. Now, this movie has done what no other Christian film has ever done before, and that is get me to watch a second time, which I did for this video. And I gotta say, this is definitely a movie that kind of falls apart a little bit upon a second viewing. For instance, there are 6 plots loosely connected by pure coincidence or small world in this movie. You have the main plot, which is a college freshman named Josh Wheaton who has to defend the existence of God against his atheist professor, Jeffrey Radisson, played by Kevin Sorbo. Then you have a Chinese student named Martin, which is, again, kind of a writing error because he's a fresh off the boat person from China attending a school in America named Martin, which is odd. Then you have a girl in a Muslim home that works in a cafeteria who has apparently been a Christian for over a year. There's a lefty blogger that gets cancer. Then you have Reverend Dave and his African missionary friend who can't seem to leave town because of vehicle starting troubles. And then you have Jeffrey Radisson's girlfriend whose mom has dementia and is also a Christian. And her brother, as well as her boyfriend Jeffrey Radisson, the aforementioned professor, are atheists. So you have 6 plots loosely connected. And then you have a movie that very much relies on a Big Eva mentality. And what do I mean by Big Eva? I know I throw this word around a lot and don't always explain what it means. Big Eva refers to a guild of those who are allowed to make lucrative religious book deals and speaking engagements. It's an industry of Christianity. That's what Big Eva is. It's an industry. And not everyone in Big Eva is evil or bad or anything. Like, I don't have anything against Newsboys. I don't have anything against the Duck Dynasty clan. But I will say that Willie and Corey Robertson are extremely redundant in this movie. They serve zero purpose in the plot that's not also served. Their biggest contribution in this plot is citing Matthew 10:32 through 33, which is cited by a different character in a different plot. So, the thing is, you don't need both plots to have characters. You don't need multiple plots to have characters cite the same exact Bible verse. That's redundant to the audience. So they're the redundancy in this movie. And they're also just the celebrity culture that's really, they're really just in this movie to promote this movie. So, Willie Robertson's in this movie just so that the movie can get Willie Robertson to advertise this movie so it can be a commercial success. And he really serves no purpose in the plot. Then you have Newsboys, which they're more of a brand than a band. And I have nothing against their music or anything, but if you look at the lineup of Newsboys, they haven't had an original member in over a decade. So it's really just a bunch of people come and go and make music together, which is fine, but, it kind of, I'll comment more on the main character. So it's a very much a Big Eva mentality type of movie. It's definitely a movie that promotes Christian celebrity culture. And, I think that really undermines the plot. It makes it less gritty, it makes it less realistic. So let's dive into the main characters of this movie. And again, I'll only focus on the main plot. I'm not going to focus on every other plot in this movie. So we got the main character. His name is Josh Wheaton. And I believe he's a stereotype. And he's a brilliantly crafted stereotype. If they did this on purpose, if they created such a stereotypical main character on purpose, I give them credit. I'm not sure they actually did, though. Because let's think about it. Josh Wheaton has a girlfriend of 4 years whom he plans to marry after college. This is a parental fantasy. This is a parental fantasy written by people with no experience in young dating within Christianity. Spoken with experience, there is no way that a boyfriend and girlfriend of 4 years who are both Christians would wait an additional 4 years to get married after college. That does not happen. That is a fantasy world that the writers were living in. But again, I think he's a stereotype. Like, they created a stereotype of evangelical subculture in the main character, Josh Whedon. So I think that is a really unrealistic expectation, that you can date someone for 8 years and maintain purity culture. Because I don't think you can promote purity culture and not also promote young marriage, young families. And so I'm a product. I can speak with experience that this is a fantasy. Being someone that has gotten married during college with someone that I met during college, let alone the idea that someone could date someone for 4 years in high school and then wait another 4 years to get married within a Christian context. That's unrealistic and unbiblical, I would argue. There's no use in dating for 8 years if you're a Christian. So then he has a Newsboys poster in his room, which kind of like taps into the fact that like Newsboys is really a company of musicians, but they're not really a traditional band. You think of like ZZ Top, which I believe holds the record for like the longest contemporary band lineup. Like the members have stuck together as a band for like 50 years. Whereas Newsboys is quite the opposite. They have a rotating lineup of musicians come in. And then he's a college freshman majoring in pre-law. And the other thing about this is that pre-law is not a major that you recommend, that I've ever heard lawyers recommend. And this is actually a remark made by Jeffrey Radisson. He makes fun of Josh Whedon in the movie for majoring in pre-law, calling it not a real major. Which kind of like furthers this idea that I've never heard lawyers recommend pre-law as a college major. And then I think this character is not very explored. He's not explored enough. This is a character that appears to be very quick on their feet and can negotiate, but the movie really just relegates him to a construct of Big Eva youth. Like, I think we should have had a scene in the beginning where, it could have been with his girlfriend, where he is very quick on his feet in a situation, and then we see him thrusted into a classroom where he's very quick on his feet to come up with this idea that I can't declare God is dead. How about we resolve? How do we move forward with this? And we don't really see enough of this character. I don't think he's explored enough. He's really just a stereotype. That's really what he is. So then we have the college professor in this situation. His name is Jeffrey Radisson, as I've said, and he's an extremely rigorous college professor. In this case, I believe the class is Philosophy 160, which is a first year class. And my impression is Philosophy 160 is a more advanced philosophy course than, say, Philosophy 101 or 105. I believe in college I took Philosophy 150, which was a humanities course that I took senior year of college just to graduate. And it was not nearly as hard as this class was. So he's an extremely rigorous professor. And he hates Christianity, but has a Christian girlfriend that he's verbally abusive for. So he's the type that can't get away from the atheism versus theism fight. He cannot get away from that, and that's why he dates a Christian girlfriend. And then he holds on to the God is Dead papers that his students submit like he's a serial killer holding on to past trophies. Like, he's kind of like creepy in that regard. And again, upon my second viewing of this movie, Jeffrey Radisson is a completely one-dimensional character and a lot more one-dimensional than I remembered. And I don't necessarily find that to be a bad thing. Like, he is a stereotype as well, but he's also a real stereotype. Imagine if you were making a movie about the woke social justice warrior mob trying to destroy someone's life. And they're the villains, right? They would be a completely one-dimensional, monolithic mob that is a villain in a movie. And you might think that that's too on the nose, but it's realistic. So I can't really fault the movie for making him a one-dimensional character. I think that's more realistic than giving him multiple dimensions. They do flesh out Jeffrey Radisson as a character quite a bit. In the end, he's just egotistical, and there's no real getting away from that. And then the third main character in this movie is God. And I know that's kind of weird to hear, that God is somewhat treated as an interactive character in this movie that weaves the plot together, because the plot is not going to weave itself together. It needs God as a character in the movie to weave the plot together. And I don't think that really works in a movie that's not explicitly diving into biblical canon. Like, it works in the Ten Commandments that God's a character in the movie. It works in Prince of Egypt that God's a character in the movie. It obviously works in Passion of the Christ, where Jesus, God, is a character in the movie. I don't think it works in God's Not Dead that relies on God to be a character in the movie. I don't think it works. I think it comes off as coincidental, and then Small World, which is bad writing, in my opinion, when it comes to movies. A plot should never rely on coincidence. And when you have God as this interactive character, it may not be a coincidence per se, but from a writing perspective, it's basically the same thing. It's basically a coincidence. You just explain it as God being the cause of the coincidence rather than bad writing. And I think God as a character weaving the plot together works in the movie The Signs with Mel Gibson, and the Shyamalan twist being that God worked all these little details together so that when the time came, you see that God has a purpose you see Romans 8:28 in action. That works in Signs because it's a twist. It doesn't really work here. It comes off as cheesy and just a coincidence. It doesn't necessarily come off as God at work. So the main plot is about a kid, or a college freshman, who attends a Philosophy 160 course, a first year philosophy course, and immediately the professor says, "Write on this paper, God's not dead, so we can move on and proceed to the other material." And Josh Wheaton, being a Christian, says, "I cannot do this. I physically cannot do this. I cannot offend the Holy Spirit that is living in me." And so he's like, "I can't write this." And so Jeffrey Radisson's like, "Okay, well then you're going to have to make up the material. And then you're going to have to cover the material that we're skipping by declaring God is dead." And so Josh Wheaton takes up this challenge. And, we see him being very quick on his feet in negotiating this situation. And ultimately, that's what the movie's about. Him taking on apologetics. Now, this sounds like the stakes are high, but this is really contrived. These stakes are contrived and exaggerated. This movie takes place over the course of 2 weeks. And the main character has 3 class periods to prove the existence of God. So if it's a class that meets twice a week, by the end of 2 weeks, he has completed this assignment. And then there's a Newsboys concert reference the following Friday. So that's, again, this movie takes place over the course of 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks of a college semester. Now, having graduated college, I can attest to you that the first 2 weeks of a college semester are generally the least busy weeks. This movie acts like that Josh's actions are such a great risk that he will fall behind in all his other classes, that, this class, and I believe if he were to fail this task, he could probably withdraw and not have it hit his GPA in the first 2 weeks. So, and furthermore, he is a college freshman with no job. He has no excuse for not being able to make up the lost time later in college. Again, I didn't know I had to take a humanities credit until senior year of college, my 4th year. And he's acting, and the stakes in this movie make it seem like, no, I'm on a rigorous schedule to graduate. It's like, you're a college freshman that has already declared a major. You got time to spare. So this is and he has no job. He's not working while in college. So there's no excuse for why he can't make up lost ground. There's no excuse for why he can't do 18 credits a semester if he needs to graduate in 4 years, because he has no job. And apparently he's not getting married either. So the stakes in this movie are entirely contrived. And I would also argue that the main plot does not go far enough. So the deal that he strikes with Jeffrey Radisson is that he gets the last 20 minutes of 3 class periods to prove the existence of God. That totals a maximum of 60 minutes of screen time that this main plot could take, but it doesn't take enough time. We don't see enough of the back and forth, and we don't see enough of these lectures that have 60 minutes of time allotted to them. We see maybe 10 minutes in what is, an hour and a half to 2 hour movie, I think. We easily could have had more time focused on this main plot and less time focused on the 5 other plots that are barely even connected to this plot. Like, they don't all come together. They really don't. And Josh succeeds in the end because he provokes Jeffrey Radisson into admitting he ordered the code red. And that's a reference to the movie A Few Good Men. Now, this works in A Few Good Men, starring Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson, the one who says you can't handle the truth. This works in A Few Good Men because the stakes were real. Tom Cruise was risking his military career in provoking a superior officer, in questioning his legitimacy. There was a real risk to his military career in provoking a superior officer. So this works. It works that, he provokes Jack Nicholson's character into admitting that he ordered the code red. It doesn't really work in this movie. It comes off as a good line, but when we don't see enough of the back and forth leading up to it, it's kind of cheesy. And I don't think this movie explored the debate over theism enough. I don't think it goes far enough on its main plot. It spends way too much time on 5 other plots. And if you look at the 5 other plots, they really don't connect at all. The lefty blogger never interacts with Josh Whedon. The girl in a Muslim home never interacts with Josh Whedon twice. The first time being she works in the school's cafeteria. She works in a college cafeteria and overhears Josh Whedon arguing with his girlfriend about whether he should defend the existence of God or not. And then the movie ends at a Newsboys concert where she so happens to be sitting in the row behind Josh. That's too much of a coincidence. That's absurd. And then we had the lefty blogger with cancer whose boyfriend is the brother of Jeffrey Radisson's girlfriend, Mima, or something like that. And again, too much of a small world. And I think the movie also implies, spoiler alert, that Jeffrey Radisson gets hit by a car and hit and run. I think it was his ex-girlfriend's brother, because I believe they break up by the end of the movie. His ex-girlfriend's brother is the one who hits him and then runs. So it's such a small world, and it's just, and again, I'm not really into that at all. Like Reverend Dave and his African missionary friend who can't seem to get their car started, and they get a car driven to them. And ironically, it's like all they had to do to make sure the car wouldn't start was to not turn the car off. Like the rental car doesn't start, when the only thing you need to do there was not to shut off the car in the first place upon delivering it. It's such a contrived obstacle. Also, that Reverend Dave can be at Jeffrey Radisson's side when he gets hit by a car and mortally wounded, so that Jeffrey Radisson can then confess Jesus as his savior. And it just kind of comes off as cheesy that the villain in the end accepts Christ right before death. I think that's kind of cheesy, especially since it's not based off a true story, but it is based off a real concept. It's inspired by the real concept of college professors imposing atheism on students. That's a real story. So, God's Not Dead, bit of a mixed bag. I don't think it's not a terrible movie, but it's deeply flawed because it relies on contrivances and coincidences. And I don't think they explore the elements that make the story compelling enough. They focus on 6 plots instead of 2 or 3. And I don't think they go far enough in exploring the details that the story was made to explore. So that's all I got to say about that. My name is Ray. This is the Evangelical Dark Web. If you like this kind of content, do subscribe. And I will catch you on the next one.